But what I'm saying is the skill fade we see in years is the tip of the iceberg. Actually, when we feel we are de-skilled, it's actually way beyond the point where we actually are performing well enough to meet the normal clinical standards we have in our society. So we are effectively talking months. And that is what our data show.
So you're saying by the time you have a concern, you've been dangerous for quite a period of time. Can I ask then, is there any data around skill fade and just aging? So you might still be performing those skills, but is there a cognitive decline? Do we have any evidence of that?
It's complicated, and that's why there is no hard, clear evidence pointing to one direction or another. For example, if you look at, and now this has been investigated in surgical skills, for example, if you look at surgical skills, then you notice that there's not enough data to draw a clear curve with a dose response effect. But up until some point, there is an advantage from consultants over residents. And then past a certain point, age becomes actually a deleterious factor. Nobody can pinpoint that because obviously there's a large inter-individual variability. And especially when it comes to psychomotor skills, and especially when it comes to vision accuracy, not only the type that you can easily correct, but the way contrast.
Yeah.
Or for a pilot, the way contrast at night, which we know decreases with age. And those things are not well investigated in the applied setting because obviously it's very difficult. And that's something we encountered as well, to put together the methodology to investigate the 7 skills we want to investigate. It took us 2 years of trial and error.
I guess the other thing that I really loved that you said today in your talk is teaching is not training. Can you just explain that for us, please?
That's something that I find, especially in the medical field, is often confused for several reasons. First is because as medical doctors, we have very few knowledge of cognitive processes. If we do, it's because we read up on it, let's say out of interest, but it's not taught to us. And the way we learn, especially with regard to skills, is there is a cognitive stage where you process the information, and then there is an associative stage where you try to integrate movement, motor actions with the sensory input and make it smooth and actually learn to associate the variations of your actions with their consequences. And then there's the automatic stage where these things do not take up conscious processing power anymore. And teaching is, with regard to a technical skill, is the first 2 stages, so the cognitive stage and the associative stage. Training is making it more and more automatic and thus stress resilient.
So there's nothing more powerful than video recording. It's one thing to think about the case, but to just watch it again in real time is just the most powerful form of feedback I think there is. So a few of the consultants in Edinburgh thought, actually, this is a good thing for us to do. And we had audiovisual equipment installed in our resuscitation rooms. And I think there's kind of several aspects that need considered. I think firstly is a cultural one. You need to, as a group, accept and want to do this. Video recording is always a sensitive area. There's people that will always not want to do it. It's a very opinion generating area. But we as a group actually felt then this was a useful thing to do. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you need the tech. You need cameras and microphones, and they need to be installed. And obviously it's quite expensive, so you're going to have some funding. Whilst that's relatively straightforward, what we were lucky enough with in Edinburgh is that we had a couple of our actually junior trainees who also happened to be IT boffins and were very good at setting up this system from the back end, because all this footage needs to be stored somewhere. It needs to be curated. And of course, then when I come and say, look, I want to look at this case, someone's got to then unlock it for me because it's all obviously locked away very securely. You need to have someone that can dedicate a significant amount of time to do that, to make it work. And then I think there's the sort of, I guess, ethical, legal, regulatory considerations that you need to have. And I think my understanding is that if you just want to watch it for feedback and audit purposes, you need to obviously inform everyone, including the patients, that's happening. But you can do that as a kind of generic policy. You just say, this is what happens in our department, or this is what happens on our HIM service, if you want to object now type thing. So you don't need to do that for every single case. And only in cases like yesterday's where I want to show the footage in a more public setting, clearly everyone in the footage, we would then obtain written consent for that to happen. So it's not actually as difficult as people think.
Is there a way that we need to think about the way that we're looking for information differently? I've noticed particularly when I now type something into Google, which was always a search engine of choice for me, now the first thing that comes up is an AI answer. Was this the answer you're looking for? How can we navigate that?
It's very powerful, and therefore it deserves our attention. We have a stalker now 24 hours a day, even while we're sleeping. And I think we should all be aware of that. If that was a real person, we'd be absolutely horrified and demand that it be shut down. But we seem to allow it for the ease of, I don't know, a taxi or a music recommendation. And the same thing happens medically. So the belief is that these engineers are up all night, every night, trying to work out how to amplify rage and loneliness and shame and some pretty primitive, having said that, profoundly powerful emotions that we all have inside us. And it leverages those and it amplifies those. And so when you talk about people getting in parallel tracks of truth, how old am I? I thought there was empiric truth and that's it. And now people talk about having their own truth. That seems tautologic to me.
We got the content that happens in the room. That's the best way to do it. We really want people to do that. If you're not there, then I think everybody who attends and everybody who organizes this got a responsibility to amplify it through blogs, through podcasts. Going back to your department, you've been to a great conference at UCEN in Vienna, or you've been to ResusX. Go back and present to your colleagues. Tell them what you learn. Make sure that those lessons spread out as much as possible. So I think everybody who's involved in this has a responsibility to help everyone else as best they can to get all the good stuff out of these conferences. And wherever possible, if we can make it accessible to people from lower income countries, middle income countries, to try and get to conferences or to get hold of the content and stuff like that, then obviously that's something that we all do already and we would advocate for others to do as well.
Drawing that all together, and one of the reasons we have come together is we will all be at Incrementum next April, one of those disruptive small conferences that we've been talking about that has made real efforts to innovate and do things differently. And there's a lot that I'm looking forward to about Murcia. The curious thing that happened to me in Murcia last year, I was busy doing the hosting thing and all that other stuff, but I actually watched all of the talks. And most of the time when I go to a conference, if I've been a speaker, I tend to avoid the talks and just sit quietly rocking in a corner. But they were so good that I felt I had to go and watch them. And the other thing that I really struggle with is this idea of a community. I don't like the idea that you go along and you have to become part of a family. And if you're not part of the SMAC family or the Incrementum family, it's not a thing. But actually, there was a community at Incrementum that I really quite enjoyed. And Hania and David, I'm really excited for you to be there too. Very briefly, but as I've got you, what are the bits that you're looking forward to most, Haney and David, having only seen Incrementum from the outside?
For me, it's just being inspired by other educators. The stuff that I saw online circulating is the passion of education that I love. And I hope to be inspired by the speaker's style of speaking so I can pick things up for my own education. And of course, just the innovative medical stuff that I can bring home to my patients in the States.